Shalom, I'm Avi Ben Mordechai. Welcome to the program today. We're going to be talking about the Zadok or Zadok calendar controversy and the calling of the bride. I have with me Eddie Chumney for today's program, and we are going to get into some interesting things on the restoration of something that began thousands of years ago in the biblical texts of what we call the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, okay? So Eddie, welcome to the program today. And let's talk a little bit about this idea of the Zadok or Zadok calendar controversy and the calling of the bride. Let's do it now.
Well, I believe that this is a very important topic because it is a part of the restoration of all things. Now, in Matthew, in chapter 17, beginning in verse 10, the disciples ask Yeshua, why is it that the scribes say that Elijah must come first? Meaning that Elijah and his ministry must precede the coming of the Messiah. Mm-hmm. They're asking, is that a valid teaching? So, Yeshua says in verse 11, and Yeshua answered and said to them, Elijah truly shall first come and restore all things. And then he goes on to say, but I say unto you in verse 12 that Elijah is come already. So Yeshua affirmed the teaching that before he comes and does his messianic work, that Elijah or the Elijah ministry must precede him. So at Yeshua's first coming, we are told in Luke chapter 1, verse 17, that John the Baptist, that his ministry is of the spirit and the power of Elijah. But then Yeshua said, Elijah will come, referring to Yeshua's second coming, the days prior to his second coming, and restore all things. And so I believe that the Zadok priesthood, the Zadok calendar, the things that we find from the Qumran and the Dead Sea Scrolls in the founding and the finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls, that they are a part of the restoration that precedes Messiah's second coming.
And I think what's really interesting as kind of a backstory to everything we're talking about is that, the Dead Sea Scrolls have been hidden or were hidden for 2,000 years. I mean, the priests and the people that were down in the area of the Dead Sea at the Qumran, they hid these things in clay jars. This was a whole library of things that they had from Jerusalem. We'll get into some of the history in a moment. And they hid them in these clay jars, and they stood the test of time, essentially, for 2,000 years. And we would say basically from about 70 of the Common Era all the way until 1947. Then all of a sudden, these scrolls are found. So the point is that they were found in 1947, and then for about the next 50 years, the scrolls are put into the hands of a number of scholars, and the scholars are then poring over these things, looking for clues and information. And it's because of that, right, that we now have more knowledge about what the Qumran community really was all about.
Well, Avi, I believe in divine providence. And so I believe that the God of Israel intended for the scrolls to be found in our generation so that we can have the fulfillment of the Elijah ministry and message to restore all things. And so, as you said, while the scrolls were initially discovered in 1947, they didn't begin the process to get the information of the scrolls out to the general public at large until the 1990s. Now, there were things published in the 50s and as they found things, but to the general public at large, and to know more of what really is contained in the scrolls in a much more significant way, that didn't begin to be released until the 1990s, and now we've gone over 25 years, 30 years since that, and books are still being written, and we're still learning, and we're still figuring out what is the meaning and the significance of the scrolls. And so from our perspective, we believe that it relates to what may call the Hebraic roots, or some people call it the Messianic movement. That the heart of this movement is the message and ministry of Elijah to restore all things, and this is a part of that restoration.
So I think what we should do, probably to at least initially start off what we're talking about here, do you think it's probably appropriate that we should go over to Ezekiel 44:24?
Yeah,
and just at least to get a foundation for what's happening here.
Well, most people believe that Ezekiel chapters 40 to 48 is describing the millennial temple. And so Ezekiel 44 is in the middle of those chapters. And so beginning in verse 15, it speaks of the sons of Zadok in the following way. Ezekiel 44:15, it says...
Now, you're reading from New King James or King James?
Yeah, King James.
Okay.
It says, the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok, that kept the charge of my sanctuary when the children of Israel went astray from me, they will come near to me to minister unto me, and they will stand before me to offer unto me the fat and the blood, says the Lord God. Now, verse 24. So we're talking about the sons of Zadok now, that in controversy they will stand in judgment, and they shall judge it according to my judgments. So this is the Lord stating how he sees the sons of Zadok. The Lord is stating that the sons of Zadok, that they will make rulings in matters of Torah controversy. It says they will keep my laws, my statutes, and in all my assemblies. So that word assemblies, the root of it is moedim. That's where we get the festivals that's found in Leviticus chapter 23, and they will hallow my Sabbaths. So the Lord specifically says here in these verses that the sons of Zadok, that they will rule in matters of Torah controversy, and specifically they will rule in how or when we are to keep the biblical festivals. That's what the
word Moedim refers to. It's Moed is a divinely appointed, decreed festival.
So you and I are a part of a movement here in the end of days where so many who grew up in the church system have come out of the group system, seeing that there's mixture in today's Christianity, and they have started to keep the Sabbath, the biblical festivals, and to keep the dietary laws. And so in now keeping the biblical festivals, we all have a question regarding, okay, according to what calendar, when are we to keep the biblical festivals? So this is an issue that has come up only because of the influence in the non-Jewish world of people that's coming out of the church system, and the Lord has put upon their heart to keep the Sabbath festivals, dietary laws, among keeping the Torah in general. And now we understand that this is a part of the restoration of all things, because in Malachi chapter 4, verses 4 to 6, is where we have the verses that describe the message and ministry of Elijah in the end of days. And it says in Malachi chapter 4, verse 4, remember the Torah of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb, for all Israel and the statutes and judgments. So the subject is to remember the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is speaking about the restoration of the Torah amongst God's people. And then it says in verse 5, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming and great and dreadful day of the Lord. So before we have the second coming, the Messiah, we're going to have the ministry and message of Elijah. And here we're told how we recognize that ministry. Therefore, even though I do believe that Ezekiel 44 is future, it's speaking about the millennium, there is an important Hebraic principle that biblical history is prophecy. So this is talking about the future, but at the same time, it's referring to the past. So we had a literal Zadok the priest who was priest at the end of David's life and at the beginning of the reign of Solomon. And all the priests in Israel were Zadok priests from Solomon till 2nd century BC. And the leadership in the Qumran were Zadok priests. And when we had the Qumran community, there was Torah controversy amongst the Jewish people. And primarily, we had a Torah controversy regarding authority between the Qumran community headed by the Zadok priests and the Pharisees. And that Torah dispute of authority centered on which calendar are we going to use to follow the biblical festivals. So the Qumran community had a calendar that they referred to as a priestly calendar, by whom the Zadok priests were faithful to do, and they went to the Qumran to preserve that calendar, wherein when the Pharisaic sect came along, in order to assert their authority over the Zadok priesthood, they had their own calendar, which came from Babylon. So now one more thing, in Ezekiel 44:15, it's referring to the sons of Zadok that were faithful when the children of Israel went astray from me. And so first, that's referring to the days of David, when there was a rebellion by David's fourth son Adonijah, that when David was on his deathbed, he wanted to proclaim himself king, where David wanted Solomon to be the next king after him. And so Zadok the priest was faithful to David. And then we have in the time of Yeshua, we're told in Acts chapter 6 verse 7 that there were many priests that were obedient to the faith. So who were these priests in large number that believed that Yeshua was the Messiah? Well, if you do a study of the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's going to become obvious that they were Zadok priests. So the Zadok priests were faithful to David, and when Yeshua came, they believed that he was the Messiah. So the reward that the Zadok priests are receiving from the Lord is they are going to be his priests in the kingdom. And so there was a controversy over the Torah that was centered on the calendar, and the Zadok priests are going to rule with Yeshua in the kingdom. So in order to understand all these things, you need to have a history of the high priesthood of Israel.